We're here today to remember when 139 of your families and friends wanted what everyone else wanted: better pay, better benefits, and working conditions. The wives and families were right beside their husbands, sons, and brothers. And then Baltimore came bringing food, clothing, and support, showing what solidarity means. This process started 7 years ago at Jim Bestpitch's funeral, when Saul Snyderman approached me about getting a roadside marker to put up to commemorate this struggle. Then a few years later, I met Lynn Shindel, who took it from there. So this is a long process. You all,
Thank you very much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor to be asked to come here today and share this commemoration. I want to thank Lynn for the invitation. More importantly, I want to thank all of you guys for coming out today and helping share in this on behalf of the Garrett County Board of Education. Garrett County Board of Education. That's my other job. On behalf of the Garrett County Commissioners, I want to thank you all for coming and welcome you to Garrett County. I really want to thank Lynn a lot. First of all, he and I ran into each other on the street yesterday, and he was worried about the weather, and then he said, "Don't worry about it, I'll take care of it." And I don't know what he did, but he did a good job with it. So thank you, Lynn, for that. You know, just briefly, the only thing that I'd really like to say, a lot of you in the crowd that know me know I taught history for 10 great years at Northern High School. Still consider myself a teacher by trade, even though I went to the dark side and joined administration.
That's great.
Thank you. You know, history is what defines a place, and it's what gives a place its character and tells a place's story. And it's the good history, it's the bad history, it's the neutral history, and all too often people think of history as boring and they overlook it. We let it slip away. I don't think we cherish it enough as we should. And I really appreciate Len taking this piece of Garrett County history and really making it his own and doing something with it to commemorate it for future generations, because I've been born and raised here. This happened before I was born. I knew it happened. I had heard bits and pieces of it, understood very little about it, didn't know a lot of detail about it. And that's a shame for a history teacher in Garrett County to have a history right here in our own county and not understand that. This was the longest public worker strike in the history of the United States, and it happened right here in little old Garrett County. And for us to not tell that story or commemorate that story, shame on us. So I really do appreciate what Len's been able to do. I appreciate everyone in the crowd that had something to do with making today possible and the marker, and certainly appreciate those people that lived it. And you know, for them, if you think about it, when this was going on, this wasn't a, you know, they never thought while it was happening it was going to be something we'd be commemorating, you know, 40, 50 years later. It was just life for them, and they were trying to make it better for them and their community. And now 50 years later, we can look back and see the significance of that. So I think that's special. I think it is something that we should honor and cherish, and for that I thank Len, everyone else that had something to do with this, and all of you for coming out today. So thank you very much.
Great job.
yes. Reverend Ann. Reverend Ann Byrne from St. Matthew's Episcopal Church for Oakland.
Good morning to you all. Welcome. Actually, it's afternoon, so welcome to you all. Please bow your heads or stay silent, whatever feeds your soul. Let us pray. Holy and merciful God, we ask for your presence today as we come together to commemorate the vision, courage, and dedication of the Garrett County Road Worker Strike members. We ask to be filled with goodness and light in all that we do or say. May their determination for justice remind us to carry on in their honor and to work for all that is right in our own time and place. Fill us with courage to respect the dignity of all of creation and to make a difference. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, next, Mayor John Sincell, Montlake Park.
Thank you. I would like to say welcome to Mountain Lake Park, but that's not quite accurate unless we move this whole tent and ceremony a little stone's throw that direction. We're outside the borders of my town, but just by a little bit. Nonetheless, we're certainly the closest town to this monument, and it's a pleasure to have it here in one of the main entrances and exits to our town. You know, over the years, I've thought about this since Lynn asked me to just say a few words, and I'll keep them brief. But over the years, labor unions have gotten a bum rap, in my opinion. And the reason, part of the reason for that is people don't know the history. They don't understand. They don't understand that the real bad guys many, many decades ago were company owners, CEOs, the people who were hiring our workers, who were working in deplorable conditions much of the time, unsafe conditions, and for incredibly low pay. And you know, if you didn't like it, then you would just be kicked out, and you were barely making enough to feed your family as it was. So that was the good guys who organized and came together and made things right for so many of Americans. And I looked at just a little bit of the history, and I do remember this, sad to say. I'm a little older than Paul. But one of the things that struck me when I read a little bit of info about it, two things. Number one, those who decided to strike, the roads workers here, do you know that they really thought they could and would do it early in the year, but they had such a commitment to keeping the roads clear in Garrett County for their neighbors. It was a lot of snow that winter, and they just couldn't in good conscience walk off the job and leave people stranded and in danger. And I think that says a lot about their character. And the second thing, I again looked at the dates, and in 1970 I had just graduated high school, and I was headed to college, and I took a summer job, a construction job, with a local contractor. And I noticed that at that time those road workers were averaging a little less than $2 an hour, about $1.97 an hour. And of course I thought about that, and I said, of course money then, you know, bought more than it does now, and I did all that. But then it struck me that a kid out of high school with no training, I started my summer job at $2.25 an hour. So that really told me how underpaid these folks were. So yes, the comments about the history, it's so important that we learn the history and then preserve the history. And certainly this memorial plaque will do a lot in that regard. And I too, Lynn Shindel is one of the finest blessings to ever hit the Garrett County area. He's a mover and a shaker, and this would not have happened without him. So great to see so many people from many different walks of life and all across the state and beyond. So enjoy your day.
Thank you. And now we have Lynn Shindel, who is a retired steel worker who's come up to Garrett County and has put this together. And we're here to thank him.
Thank you very much. What a great turnout. Good afternoon, friends. It's so fine to see folks from near and far, to honor the men, women, and families that were part of the Garrett Roads workers' strike of 1970. We have folks here from Baltimore and Washington, and we even have folks here from the Eastern Shore. As Jody said, over a decade ago, Saul Schneiderman from AFCSME Local 2910 in Washington, D.C. suggested a historic road marker. And it's taken a while, but we got it done. And we got it done because of the support of people, so many people and individuals in Garrett County, in the state of Maryland, and outside the state of Maryland. So we thank the Western Maryland Central Labor Council of the AFL-CIO for requesting the road marker. And we thank so many who sent letters supporting the request. Former Garrett County Deputy Sheriff and Director of Juvenile Services, Wayne Wilt, sent the first letter in. And he's the longest standing AFCSME member in Garrett County. And after Wayne sent the letter in, numerous residents, labor organizations, historians, and notably the chairman of the Garrett County Board of Commissioners, Paul Edwards, followed suit with letters. Peter Kurtz, who heads up the Maryland Historical Trust, said that he's never seen this much support for a road marker. So it's been my deep honor and reward to spend the last couple of years talking to the families, to the few strikers that are left and their families who shared their remembrances, and also the representatives from AFCSME who helped them organize. Families shared with me their remembrances of the long hours their loved ones spent plowing the roads in Garrett County's brutal winters. They didn't bring home overtime pay, however. They were given compensatory time in the summer. A former county leader told me he carries the indelible image of roads worker Delwood Freeland standing on the back of a truck throwing cinders with icicles hanging from his hands, from his arms. He said this was inconceivable since there was equipment available to spread the cinders. Strikers' sons and daughters talked about how their fathers were sent home so often in rainy weather that they thought their fathers were on vacation. In 1970, road workers' pay was so low that many of their families qualified for food stamps. And it was this chain of indignities, this lack of respect, that led workers to vote to affiliate the Garrett County Roads Employees Association, formed in 1956 with AFCSME. And then to ask the commissioners to recognize AFCSME as their bargaining agent. These were men like Calvin Leo Rinker, who may have been a professional baseball player, but enlisted in the armed forces and was wounded fighting for democracy in the Battle of the Bulge. These were men like Don Colaw Sr., who served in World War II, then worked in Crellin's coal mines, but was evicted from his company-owned house after supporting an organizing drive by the United Mine Workers at Cray Coal Company in the early 1950s. Maybe the commissioners thought they could keep workers in the different garages in Oakland, in Accident, in Grantsville, and at the Sang Run Quarry divided. Or divide the men from their wives. Or turn the community against AFCSME by race baiting some of the union's leaders or labeling them as dangerous radicals. Their plans imploded. Workers in the garages simply refused to be divided. They met with strikers from other garages and communities, forming relationships, talking strategy for winning the strike. And as for the wives, Garrett County women were absolutely fearless. They rallied. They rallied. They sat in at the courthouse. They wrote letters to the editor. They let the commissioners know every day that they and their families were standing with their husbands in their right for a voice on the job. The strikers at AFCSME never ever took this community for granted. As prior speakers said, there was a deliberate decision not to strike in the winter when they could have brought the county to a standstill. And they also never let the commissioners attack their union without a response. Families were having difficulty surviving months on strike. And it was the union that mobilized the first strike support caravan on June 6, 1970, 51 years almost to this day. Men and women, young and old, black and white, gathered in Baltimore with food and clothing. They traveled to Hagerstown and Cumberland, picking up more cars and supplies, and by the time they got to the Armory in Oakland, there were 200 cars. Local clergy members tried to intervene and facilitate a settlement, but they were rebuffed by the county commissioners who said, "You save souls, we'll save the county." Local 1834 members and their families mobilized politically. They campaigned for candidates in the 1970 commissioner election who promised to settle the strike. And on election day, new leadership was elected. And the strike was settled in a matter of days. The strike and the election of 1970 moved the entire county forward, not just in how the county treated its workers, but in how it treated our elders, our youth, our health care, our sanitation, our schools, our hospitals, and our economy. Today, we mourn the many strikers and their wives who've passed on, and we so wish they could have been here for today's honor. And we also honor the memory of the lone commissioner who stood by the roads workers, Alan S. Dick Paw. There's a road at Garrett College named after him. It's on a sad note that I report that Ray Metz, who organized the first highway local in the state of Maryland in LaVale, and then came up to Garrett County and volunteered his time on the weekends to help organize the roads workers, is now hospitalized. So from this day forward, let's never ride another road or cross another of the fine bridges built by the Garrett County roads workers without thinking about the courage and commitment of those who came before. Let's never forget the precious truths that they left us with, that the only way to improve the lives of working families is to raise our voices, to support one another, and to defeat those who would manipulate us into hating on other working people. That is how we honor their legacy.
Yes.
Next year is Garrett County's sesquicentennial celebration, 150 years since the county was established, and it's because of your work, because of your family's struggle, that next year the Garrett County roads workers will be honored and remembered for what they did,
Yes.
for who they were,
Yes.
and for the lessons and inspiration that they left behind.
Yes.
Thank you. And now it's my honor to introduce Tom Holler, a retired Garrett County roads worker and the son of Lyden Holler, one of the road strikers. Tom has gone out and called folks and made sure they got here and done everything he could to honor his father and the other folks who led this struggle. So, Tom.
Tell everybody that we're glad to see you all here, and we really need to thank Glenn. Man has really been out of his way to bring this here together.
Yes.
I have to learn.
Okay, so we have a lot to thank for him of putting this thing together along with our union and things out of Baltimore. But that's just one of the ones that have supported the road worker strike and stood beside of them and walked the picket line with them. Even though I was not an employee with them, I was supporting my dad and the ones in the church.
Yes.
And but the main thing is I'm sure glad that this hadn't come along a few years ago so they could enjoy it. That is the main thing. But I'm glad that the families does take pride in what they are now, and we're glad that they are supporting them yet and stand behind their families.
Yes.
And I certainly appreciate it.
Thank you. And now I'd just like to recognize a few people who are great and good to us. Mayor Rob Record. Rob, he's a union man also. He represents the Regional Council of United Brotherhood of Carpenters and Joiners and the Council Representative of Eastern Atlantic States. And I'd like to also recognize Carol Braun, who is now the union rep for this union.
Hey, Carol. Hey, Carol. Hey, Carol.
And I don't know if he made it yet or not, Evan West from UNISERV, Garrett, Allegheny Garrett County Teachers. And now next I'd like to introduce, as some of you already know, John Gates, who has been here before and is a representative of the teachers union.
Few more recognitions. Before my friend John, a few more acknowledgments. Greg Harvey, President of United Steelworkers Local 676 of the former Verso Paper Mill. Bill Miller, President of AFCSME Local 1834. Steve Bennett, Vice President of AFCSME Local 1834. Herbie Rounds, Junior DeWitt, Lynn Elmlinger, retired President, Garrett County Teachers Association. Mike Bello, retired President, Communications Workers 2107 in Annapolis. Jim Hunter, retired Director of the Utility Department of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers in Washington, D.C. George Kuntz, President of Local 307, International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, and President of the AFCSME of Western Maryland. Patrick Hunt, retired researcher, communications workers of America in Washington, D.C., and a 2020 Garrett County presidential elector. Are there any other Western Maryland leaders here other than our esteemed Donna Edwards? Yes. Thank you, John.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Jody, I may need your assistance to make sure my papers don't fly away here. I am John Gates, the former business rep for AFCSME Council 67. I worked with two different Garrett County presidents during my 10 years here. I worked with Kathy Lyons, and I worked with Jeff Friend. Kathy was little in stature. However, she was big in commitment when it came to fighting for the rights of the membership of Local 1834. Sometimes communicating with our own members is a challenge. There'd be times when we would, that she'd be challenged at a union meeting because of the way she handled the situation or a grievance. She'd always listen to them, and they'd have their debate, but when the debate was over, they realized Kathy was right, and they backed their seats and sit quietly. And I got to remember, Kathy's like this, and she's the president of this road workers, 140 men, but she was tough as ever. She was a very good person. Jeff Friend, I saw Jeff when I came in, president's work. Jeff, you still here? Where are you? Hey, Jeff. The Friend name goes back to the pioneers of this county, and Jeff knew the politics of this county. He'd be on my negotiation teams, and Jeff knew how to read people well. And we'd be negotiating, and he'd say, "John, hold back on that one. Don't concede to that yet. Don't do anything." About a week later, we come back to the table, same issue. Jeff said, "Bring it up again." Some way, somehow, Jeff knew the right people. The issue got moved. And I appreciate Jeff for all his support. I also want to take a moment to recognize other AFCSME reps that served Local 1834 over the years. As Lynn said, my good friend Ray Metz, who is also president of Western Maryland AFL-CIO. Ray was a giant in the labor movement, and I recently visited him in the hospital. And we talked about labor issues over the years. And he brought up today's event. And he said, "John, I don't think he'll be able to attend this event. Please let Lynn know that I think he did one hell of a job with the recognition of the Garrett County Roads Department." And I'd like to echo those sentiments as well. The time, the effort, the dedication, and research you put in this project is absolutely astounding. Your efforts with getting this historical marker will ensure Local 1834 road workers strike will never be forgotten. We owe you a world of gratitude. Thank you, Lynn. I also would like to bring your attention to the union reps who were assigned to this county over the years. Tom Kelleher, one of my early mentors, affectionately known as TK, he was assigned here. One of my dearest friends who's passed away, Hal Fox, who brought me on, was the union serve director of 1834. And Jim Bestpitch, and the current rep, Carol Byrne. These men served Local 1834 of dedication and pride. TK and Hal were assigned to Local 1834 Garrett County Roads by the great union leader Ernest Crowfoot. His name remains a legend with Maryland labor and politics. And I'd be remiss if I didn't reference the assistant director at that time for Ernie, which was Mr. Ray Clark. Ray Clark was a big man in stature. He was a big guy. He was also big and influential in Maryland politics, especially Baltimore City. Now, when Ray, and Glenn and I remember, when Ray would say something's going to be done, it was going to be done. He was no nonsense guy. So, remember I told you I was talking with my friend Ray Metz. These Rays get confusing here. We were going over some labor issues over the years, that things we had done, and he started talking about the strike in 1970. And he says, Garrett County workers are having trouble with their basic needs: food, clothing, funding, the whole bit. Well, Ray Clark in Baltimore says, we're going to support our union brothers up in Garrett County. Yes. So Ray Clark organizes 3 busloads of people drove out of Baltimore City into Garrett County. Ray's telling me the story. You know, to help with food, funds, anything they may need. So Ray says that when Oakland folks looked up and saw the union brothers from Baltimore City roll in here, he said He said this town was buzzing for weeks. But they saw what real unity was. Now, I was assigned to Garrett County by my good friend and the current executive director, Mr. Glenn Middleton, who is here with me today, and his chief of staff, George Geeson. A lot of time with these guys. But any time when I served in Garrett County, and I would call Glenn for any of the locals, especially Garrett County, Glenn always gave me the same answer. John, whatever you need, you got it. That's the way Glenn responded to this Western Maryland area. And in fact, the 20-year anniversary, I have some photos here. I'm going to try to get them to Lynn, get them blown up so they can be kept here for historical records. Glenn used to say, when you negotiate for your locals, we'd be in staff meetings, say, you negotiate for your locals, you go in and negotiate the best you can for them. It's working people, they work hard. Negotiate the best you can. But he said, when you get to Garrett County, he says, Garrett County is not only important to the state of Maryland, it's important to unions across the country. Do your very best. So on the 20th year anniversary of the strike, I told Glenn, Kathy, and Jeff remembers, we'd be excited. You should be up here with me, brother. Come on up. I say, you'd be excited. We're trying to bring Jerry McEntee in. Now, Glenn's not a guy either shy. When Glenn goes after something, he goes after it. So their staff was pushing back on Glenn about the time we gave them, this time he was off, and if he could make it here or not. So I get a call the night we're going to have the thing, and Glenn says, John, I said, what? He said, it's done. I said, what's done? He said, McEntee's coming. You have someone over to Cumberland Airport. Believe it or not, we have an airport. In
West Virginia.
In West Virginia, he says, you have somebody over there to pick McEntee up. So I spread the word to our Garrett County people, and we're all elated that the international president, who's just been around the country fighting different battles, changed his schedule under Glenn's convincing him to come out here and to recognize that 20-year anniversary. I called my brother, who's in Cumberland. I said, Steve, need a favor. What is it? Same answer as Glenn. I'll do it. Brings McEntee up. I think McEntee rolls in right in. It's time that he's been introduced for that night. And it was one heck of a night. And I've got pictures maybe later to share around. A lot more folks were around then who were involved in that strike. But that's the kind of support you have from AFCSME Council 67. And it is a big organization. And Glenn has always been there for me, as I was a rep here for over 10 years with 8 different locals. He's always that way for Garrett County Local 1834. So I think we should give him a hand as well. You're almost done. You're still getting my papers in order. So I just want to close with this. Dr. King was assassinated in 1968 in Memphis. Now, a lot of you are labor leaders, so you really know why he was there. But most of the general public thinks that Dr. King was there for one of his organizations, voting rights, or he was there for school equalization or voter registration. But AFCSME and organized labor in the early 60s and 70s, 80s, the civil rights movement and the labor movement walked together.
Yes.
Dr. King was there because something similar in Memphis was happening with AFCSME sanitation workers.
Yes.
He was requested by Bill Lucy and Brother Jones, the president local there, to come show them support.
Yes.
That's why Dr. King was assassinated. He was there in that where he was assassinated. He was there to support the same type of struggling events that was occurring here in Garrett County 2 years later. So I transition that to say, I want to channel a little bit of Robert Kennedy to end this out. And his quote, I think, is appropriate to bring forces together. I'll try to channel him a little bit. Each time an individual stands up for an ideal or acts to improve the lot of others, or strikes out against injustice, they send forth a tiny ripple of hope, and crossing each from a million different centers of energy. And daring those ripples build a current that can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance. That's what happened in Garrett County. The ripples went out, the resistance comes up, and the wall was swept down. So it was my pleasure and honor to serve Western Maryland, and especially Garrett County Local 1834. God bless you.
Thank you, John. Next, we have Miss Donna Edwards, who is a Western Maryland gal who is the president of the Maryland, D.C. AFL-CIO.
Good afternoon, sisters, brothers, family, friends. What a celebration. I want to honor the families and the men and their children and the wives who made this happen. And also let you know a little bit more about who I am. I was born, reared in Cumberland, Maryland. I still spend half my time in Cumberland. I am a mountain woman. Do not call mountain women country women, because we aren't. We are mountain women. There is a big difference. And I also grew up in Allegheny County, which you know was the bastion of unionism in this state for many, many years. And in the 70s, in 1970, I was still in high school. And I remember my father, who was very involved with the PPG Glass. He had been the vice president of that local for a while. We did our boxes and our volunteers, and even at the schools, we put together, boxes that we brought up here to support the strikers. And it was a community thing, not just for Garrett County, but for all of Western Maryland. So we have recognized George Coots, who is the president of the Western Maryland CLC. I heard a speaker say that Garrett County was founded about 150 years ago. I can tell you that several years ago we supported the 110th anniversary of the Western Maryland Central Labor Council. That's how strong labor has been in our part of the state. And I also, before, got to meet some of the wives that had held up the strikers. And I want to tell you, I'm the first woman ever elected president of the Maryland State and DC AFL-CIO. So, we've come a long way, but we've had 40 years since here. And by the way, I've been an AFCSME member for 45 years. I worked for the state. I was president of AFCSME Council 3 now. It was 92. With state employees, I was a social worker. And I've lived our history. But let me tell you, we've been under attack for these 40 years. And we have to understand, looking at this crowd, how this survived. This was a victory. Because everybody lended a hand. Everyone supported the right of these workers to have dignity and respect on the job. And that's all workers ask, is give us a voice. Let us have the right to collectively bargain. And in this state, one of the main things I do is lobby for labor. And I'm so proud that our mountain counties, Garrett, Allegheny, and Washington, recognize the right of workers, if they choose, to form a union and collectively bargain. That's something we've got to be proud of, because there's a few counties still in Maryland that you can't do that. They're just not allowed. So I want us to celebrate all of that, and I want us to understand that being union has nothing to do with a political party. It means celebrating the right dignity of people who are working, who are bringing home a paycheck and putting food on the table. And we are a very diverse group, and we know that we can support each other in any fight that we have to bring better wages, better benefits, and a better quality of life to our community. As you heard, our strikers cared about the community. Workers live and care about the community. And that's all we ask, is to recognize that and stop attacking unions. For 40 years, unionism has gone down because of policies, and the wage gap and the wealth gap has just skyrocketed. So let's embrace this. In fact, when I was driving up here, I said, oh, look at the revival tent. No, that's us. So let's use this as we would if we were celebrating anything else, and rededicate ourselves to supporting each other as workers, as people who are just trying to do the best that they can for their families and their community, and doing it through a collective bargaining and an organized labor way. We are the family, not policymakers, not elected officials. We, workers together, we're our family. We are our family, and our differences, everybody has them. But we are strong together, we are powerful together, and we have a lot more to do in our country and in our communities and around our dinner tables to bring us back together and move us forward, because that's what we do. We go to work every day in order to make it better for everyone else. Yeah. And I love you, it's wonderful, but use this day as a celebration and an honor. Yes. And remember it, because history, if it's not remembered, not taught, yes, it's forgotten. Yes. And we cannot forget and repeat what we've been repeating. So thank you.
Thank you.
I have the pleasure, I want to thank Lynn for all the dedication and all the work you did. I want to follow up on John's story, because as president of AFCSME, the state employees, I had them do a convention at Rocky Gap right after it got established. And I asked for President Jerry McEntee to come also. And again, we had him fly into what we think is an airport in Cumberland. So we're like, no, you won't be taking one of those planes. It's going to be a little smaller so that it doesn't run off the runway. And he got there, and it was a very rainy night at our convention. And I want to tell you why I'm saying this, is that the story wasn't forgotten. He told about coming here to Garrett County, and he told about the strike and the courage and the solidarity of this community. You know, I'm the firstborn out of West Virginia. I'm born in Maryland, and in my family. And I want to tell you, I know what our communities, how we bond together. And so it's very important. And I want to introduce, Lynn, you did the history, and you did the work, and you got the monument out here. But there was Wind Beneath His Wings, and it is our leader and the director of AFCSME Council 67, Glenn Middleton, who always thinks about making sure we have a revival tent, we have food, you have dirty cloths up, and you have t-shirts and giveaways. Glenn, you are a powerful, remarkable leader. Thank you.
We all love you, Donna.
Oh, thank you.
President for life of the Maryland State and DC AFCSME. I just want to first of all begin by saying we've always called this God's country, and today it truly is God's country. It's a great celebration. We're proud of all of you. We want to thank all of you. We want to thank your families. We want to thank the workers here that made the difference in the lives of all of you, but also this area that we call God's country made a big difference. Then I want to say a few words, then I just want to mention a few people here, and then I'll leave and come out and celebrate with you. But I want to begin by first of all saying, it's great to be here. We always love, right, George, to come up to God's country. We love it. But also I want to say, we thank you all for taking your time to come here today. Because you could have been doing a lot of other great things. That's probably Lynn too. Same thing for Lynn, we thank you. But I want to say that this celebration is incredible and awesome, and we thank you for this. And think about 51 years ago. People who believed in the principles of unionism so strongly that they risked their jobs. They risked their livelihood. They risked their personal safety and the welfare of their families to send a strong, strong message to management that they would not be ignored. This was about the respect for the working men and women here in God's country, who told every day and and day without any recognition for the jobs they were doing. This was about fairness and doing the right thing. As we in the unions always say, they never wavered. They stood together. They supported each other. And their families stood firm behind them, which is awesome and incredible, until they got the right to collectively bargain for the hours, wages, and working conditions they deserved. Their commitment to the belief was unshakable. Entire families got involved and helped send the message that these mountain women and men and children are not always going to go away. We are here to stay, and you were here to stay, and you're still here. Unions everywhere are better off today because of the example that you set courageously throughout this country and your commitment. And the women and men and children of Garrett County today are thankful for this. And as I get ready to close out, I just want to say I got a couple more lines just to read to you. Your story needs to be told and retold over and over again. We say thank you simply is not enough. The picture of your effort of the women and men here involved an honor to our council, Council 67, AFCSME Maryland Council 67, and our executive board members. And in the end, a few of them are here. I'm going to ask them to come up. In addition, Council 67 will sponsor a resolution before the 2022 AFCSME International Convention to recognize and officially thank you and your families and your loved ones on behalf of all 1.3 million AFCSME members. Your efforts, thank you. On behalf of our President, Lee Saunders, who's represented here by Corey Blake. Corey, who's on staff with us, but he left us to work for the International. And we're glad to have him there. He's a true friend. Your efforts as I close out made history and a road marker placed in your honor will help and keep that memory alive. Thank you, Len. And thank you, God bless you, and all of you. Whenever you drive past that marker, just wave. George said, make sure I say this, George Geeson, and smile because you know why it's there and what it stands for. Your bravery, your courageousness, and how strong you were and your no-nonsense made the difference. And then I just want to mention a few people, if you don't mind, and then I'll close out. I want to mention, we have, and I want them to come up so you can see these representatives. The President, Bill Miller, of the Garrett County Roads. Is Bill still around? He's over in the back. There you go, Bill. Bill, come on up. Thank you, Bill. Executive Board Member Herbie Rounds, Executive Board Member Todd Glover, Chris Crabtree, Executive Board Member. Bill Gumphrey, thank you. I know you talk to me when I sit down next to you about your dad. We want to thank you all. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you. We thank you. So I wanted to say that. Thank you, brother. Thank you, brother. You have two. And Carl, you come up too. You're the representative for God's country with all these distinguished representatives. Thank you all. Thank you all. Thank you. Again, I just want to tell a brief story. And then I want y'all to stay because I wanted the staff to come up too. And the representative, Corey, the representative. I want George, our chief of staff, to come up in a minute. But I just want to say, I have one story to tell you about Baltimore City. I started in Local 44, which is the Baltimore Municipal Employees, back in the one part of the 70s, I'll just say. 4 years after the strike, in the 70s, I started working for the city in corrections at City Jail. George was the one that interviewed me, and now we're both working together. But I want to say this to you, and he's our chief of staff. I want to say this to all of you, that as the executive board members come up so we can speak to them, would they come up now? Dorothy, who else? There's David in the back, executive board members. Come up, please. And then I just want to close out and say to you that, and then the staff come up because George and them put it together. Don, George, Neil, Mike, because they put it together. And Corey's represented the national president. And then as I close out, I just want to say that there was a strike in the city of Baltimore in '74, and I participated in it. After I got hired at the jail, I was only there for 3 months. And I walked out with the strikers, all the corrections people. And what happened was I lost my job for a few months. For 3 or 4 months, I lost my job. The strike was April the 18th, and they didn't bring me back to July the 1st. I got hired back. This guy was responsible for me getting hired back. And I've been with AFCSME ever since. But I want to say to you, they fired me because I walked out the jail when all the officers walked out. I'd only been there 3 months, and they said they're going to fire you if you walk out. Well, I told them my dad was involved in the strike in '58 when I was 10 years old. And my dad took all of his kids down to Bethlehem Steel. I lived in a small community called Turner Station in Dundalk. And he took us all out of school for 3 days to walk the picket line down at Bethlehem Steel, 5 miles away across the bridge. We walked the picket line. And all of his kids, there were 6 then, it was a total of 7. 6 of us were taken out for a whole day to walk the picket line. So when the jail went on strike, I walked out too. I just didn't think I was gonna get fired. George told me don't do it, they're gonna fire you. They fired me. But I got my job back 3 months later though, which is great. So I wanna say to each and every one of you, we wanna thank you for all that you do and your family members do, the men and women of what we call God's country. We wanna always serve you. We wanna always be your friend. We're your family. We're there with you when you don't think that we're going to be with you. We want to thank for George, because George and the staff put this together with the folks here, lending them. It was their idea to do this, and I'm glad that they came up with this idea. And we will have another celebration too. And we're going to ask George to do the same thing, and Dawn and everyone else. We also have 2 of our board members that's here, that served for quite some time. You want to introduce yourself and where you from? What part of this beautiful state you're from? Western Maryland.
I'm Chip Cook. I'm the Vice President of the Central Maryland Labor Council, which is Washington, Frederick County.
Yes.
I spent 32 years with the United Steelworkers,
Yes.
Local 7886 down in Frederick, and I've been 14 years with AFCSME.
That's right.
So I have just as much time in the union as Glenn and Donna.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm David C. Basler. I'm from Local 434 in Baltimore County. Our representative, our president, Brian Epps, asked me to be here to represent him today.
Yes.
And he sends his regards and the reminder that we all are family and we should all stand together. And we appreciate the roads that your folks set in the longest strike in U.S. history of public employees. And we always stand together for our family. Thank you, John.
I'm Dorothy Bryan, part of the Executive Board. Matter of fact, Secretary Treasurer for the Executive Board of Council 67. And I didn't want to miss this great, marvelous celebration because it meant so much. It meant that the guys back in those days were fighting for the same right that we are fighting for today. That's that we have good working conditions, equal pay, and have a substantial pay that we can feed our families. And we want to thank you for doing such a marvelous job and putting this together, Jody and all the rest of the people up here.
Thank you,
and
Jody.
how do we say thank you for doing such a good job?
Thank you, Jody. Don, we want to thank you for all your help, George. Did you want to say anything?
Just thanks to our videographer and photographer,
Mike Bradley and Neil.
all around
Neil.
Gophers. Whatever you need, they're there for you.
That's right. Mike and Neil.
What an intro. That's really sweet.
Thank you. And as I mentioned to you about those local 44, those 5 leaders of that local drove up here in the morning time and then drove back to Baltimore before it got dark. They did it for several weeks and drove up here, left 6 o'clock in the morning, And they told me all the stories 4 years later, in 1974, when I started meeting them. And I want to thank their families, but especially all of you. And we want to thank our international president.
You ready? Family's here. Want a couple other family members helping. Take it off. It should come off. Need a tall guy. There you go.
I just didn't want to jump in.
There you go. There you go.